And so the next speaker is Elizabeth Vosseller, also collaborator with Vikram. And the thing is interesting that the different paths of lives just cross without even meaning and or intending to do so, because one of my newest student Dan Rosa here, knows Elizabeth very well and has taken her classes, and he landed in my lab. So now we have a real opportunity to do something. And so Elizabeth, you're going to delight us with a demonstration of the, yeah?
I'm going to sit because I'm going to accommodate my co-presenter, Ian Nordling. So this is a collaborative that we're going to be doing, and thank you for your attention. Let me first introduce my co-presenter, Ian Nordling. Ian is a non-speaking, autistic, and apraxic advocate. He is on the non-speaking leadership board of I-ASC, which is the International Association for Spelling as Communication. Our mission is to increase access to communication through training, education, advocacy, and research. And Ian and his 9 other colleagues help inform and guide the organization. So you'll learn a little bit about our journey together in just a second. Ian, would you like to say anything to start us off? THANKYOU, thank you. GIVINGME, giving me. ACHANCE, a chance. TOPRESENT, giving me a chance to present. ISUGEHONOR. Thank you. Giving me a chance to present is a huge honor. Our slides will come up in just a second. But Ian's and my story begins 22 years ago. Ian and I began working on September 12th, 2001. So we started the day after 9/11, which was an emotional day, obviously, for this whole country. And I called up his mom and I said, should we do this? Should we have our appointment today, where I was going to go over to his house and work with Ian for the first time, and they were trying to assess whether or not he was autistic. And she said, I don't think that I'm up for it, but I think we have to do this, right? Because no matter what else is going on in the world, my child still needs services. So that's how we began our relationship. So we forged a really amazing friendship from day one. And this is the cute little nugget that I first met. Since then, Ian has become one of my dearest friends and one of my most amazing teachers. As a speech-language pathologist who had been practicing for many years, I started in a clinical hospital setting. I was then a university professor, and I specialized in autism and complex communication disorders. And about the time I entered Ian's life, I thought I was kind of an expert in autism. And down the road, I learned that I was not an expert, that folks like Ian and other people who are autistic, whether speaking or non-speaking, are the true experts. So Ian has truly become my teacher over the years. So for years and years and years, Ian and I did traditional speech-language therapy, and I did everything that was in my speech-language toolbox. We did play-based therapy when he was little. I hid things in a beanbox, which, by the way, later caused a mouse problem at the Nordling household. Turns out mice like dried beans. And we did picture cards. We did repeat after me. We put the people in the bus, on the bus, outside the bus, under the bus. We did all of the things. And although I believe that Ian was learning, he was not really speaking. So Ian has given his perspective on those early years of communication.
I remember that Evie always had the kindest heart. She may have been wrong in her initial approaches, but she always wanted what was best. Traditional speech therapy was always a bit frustrating and inherently the wrong approach for me. Putting pictures to words reliably was impossible and definitely not all-encompassing of what I could do. Play-based approaches are fine at 3 or 4, but there was no true expression in it.
So that went on for years and years. Now here's when I go back and I look at the foundations of what I know as a speech-language pathologist and what I taught. That language is cognitive. You are listening to me speak right now. By speaking, I'm moving my articulators, which are the moving parts of my vocal tract that produce speech. So that includes the lips, the lower jaw, the tongue, the soft palate, the pharynx, the vocal cords, and even the power source of the diaphragm to get things moving. So I'm producing speech. My speech sounds are traveling through the air, and they're hitting your ear, and they're going through your auditory system. Right, so from ear, outer ear, middle ear, inner ear, auditory nerve, and they land in Wernicke's area. Wernicke's is the area for language comprehension. So this is how you're understanding the words I'm saying is linguistically meaningful, right? A dog could bark, there could be a whistle, a knock on the door, and you can recognize that those are different environmental noises, but they're not linguistically meaningful speech. Wernicke's area is connected by a bundle of fibers called the arcuate fasciculus to Broca's area. Broca's area is the area for expressive language. Expressive language are your thoughts and ideas in words. So you're listening to me talk right now, and because all of y'all as an audience have been taught how to listen, and you're showing me the look of listening, very nice, all your hands are to self. So listening actually has no look, except we've been taught that. We've been institutionalized to have a look of listening, which is to look to the speaker, you know, maybe nod your head occasionally, and I'm assuming that you're comprehending me and that you're having thoughts and ideas about what I'm saying. So that's language right there. It's a little more complicated than this, but these are the major power centers. Language is cognitive. Now, if you want to share what you're thinking, you're going to need to communicate. Communication is defined as the exchange of information between two or more people. Communication is inherently a social activity, right? As Jonathan said, I like to move it with you. We've talked about that social connectedness. You might talk to yourself, but you're not communicating with yourself. If you think you are, come see me after this conference. We'll have a little chat about that. All forms of communication require motor. You must move something in order to communicate. So to shake your head, to point to something, to grab someone and lead them to something, to kick them, to push something away, to shrug your shoulders, to type, handwrite, sign, speak. All communication requires motor. So motor starts out with sensory. We have the sensory cortex, which is right next to the motor cortex. And as Liz's work often shows, as Liz's work often shows, as I'm using non-speaking communication with my slide partner here, that she often talks about the motor sensing process, because sensory guides the motor. If I'm walking, I'm looking ahead of me. If the lights are off and I needed to navigate through this room, I could put my hands out and use my sense of touch to navigate me. If something was burning, my sense of smell tells me where. Same as if somebody calls out to me, my sense of hearing helps me locate the source of sound. So sense is always guiding the motor. We do not agree upon almost anything in the autism space. But the one thing we do tend to agree upon is that sensory information in autism is off. It's either too much or too little. It can vary from person to person, time to time, stimuli to stimuli. So as such, it's not a great navigator to the motor system. The motor cortex right next to the sensory cortex, and right before that is the supplementary motor cortex, which helps us with motor on demand, with that movement that's deliberate, that's intentional, it's purposeful, it has a plan. So, did we miss one? Okay, go ahead. So speech is motor. And here's just a little highlight of the motor strip blown up. Approximately 75%-ish of the motor strip is dedicated to movement of the articulators and the digits. This is because there's great precision in speed and movement and dexterity of these structures. Around 25%-ish helps with the control of the arms, the legs, and the trunk. Right? So it's much easier to control those gross motor structures than it is those fine motor structures. So Ian, I had asked, what is the difference with talking about the difference between speech and language and how this resonates with him? And here's his response.
Definitely a subject that isn't understood as much as I would like. They are two completely different things. If it was understood that a lack of speech is not a sign of a lack of intelligence, then I would imagine everything would have been different. It was the shift to focusing on motor that changed my life.
This is why we say non-speaking instead of nonverbal. First of all, nonverbal is a misnomer. Nonverbal means from the Latin, without words. Clearly, people like Ian are not without words. They're without the ability to reliably use speech as an effective means of communication. And it's an umbrella term that encompasses those who have no speech, who have minimal speech, and have unreliable speech. So some folks who talk quite a bit but are not communicative reliably with their speech. Praxis is the process of going from idea to plan to execution to adaptation. So I think of something like, I want my water. And I develop a plan to get my water, which included, Ian's got his hand on mine, so it included switching the microphone, right, to the other hand. And then I'm thinking, I'm going to lean down and get my water bottle here. So as I do, I'm executing that motor plan. Now, I don't feel my water bottle, right? So I'm not reaching it, and I can adapt by using my sensory information. So I can shift my eyes and look for the water bottle, or I can kind of feel around until I find it, lift it up, and I've successfully gotten my water. So when you have an issue with praxis, you have apraxia or dyspraxia, and the number of synonyms for which is called developmental discoordination disability, childhood apraxia, so forth. So there is a breakdown between the idea is fine, the plan is fine, the breakdown is between steps 2 and 3, between planning and execution, and then because of the sensory system, there tends to be poor feedback to make that adjustment to the motor. So I asked Ian about his experience with apraxia and how he would describe how it shows up for him.
For those of you that don't know what praxis is, it is the way you get your body to do everything you want it to do. Literally, even the smallest purposeful movement. Now, imagine that you know what you want your body to do, but you can't get it to do it. That is apraxia. There is a disconnect between the brain and the body. It's like having your hands tied behind your back and duct tape over your mouth. You still have conscious thought but cannot communicate. That is our lived experience, our brain-body disconnect. Apraxia is constantly a battle for me. I know what I want to do and I know how to do it, however getting my body to go along with what my brain is telling it to do is greatly challenging. If I am coached to do something and have opportunities to practice, then it becomes easier, but if it's something new, it is a struggle. Help to support motor breakdown of new tasks is how I am able to learn to do new things and is crucial to my success.
Like I said, for about 19 years of my career, I had thought that I had acquired enough experience and training that I was an autism expert, right? And I realized that it's not me who has the knowledge, it's folks like Ian, and Ian's explanation of apraxia hits it right on the head. So I shifted from a cognitive and social and slightly behavioral approach to communication, to a motor approach to communication, and everything shifted. So we'll talk a little bit about motor, just 4 types of motor that are relevant here for this discussion. So reflexive motor is non-cognitive. You touch something, like touch something hot, and you pull your hand away. You can't control that action. It's unplanned and it's subcortical. Do that one, sorry. So one slide was missing out of here. Impulsive motor is also subcortical and it's triggered without thinking. And that's typically triggered in the amygdala and in the limbic brain. So it's often in a response to fear or other emotions, right? So Ian, who tends to wear sunglasses a lot because we found out through his communication that light bothers him, there was another one of our friends today who immediately reached up and grabbed Ian's glasses off his face, right? Because he has a desire for those glasses, and without stopping, he had an impulsive desire to grab those glasses. Now, Ian and I discussed this, so it's with his permission that I'm bringing this up, that Ian, who, when people see him, they're like, wow, he's not like my kid. He's super chilled. At which point his parents and I laugh because this was not the young Ian that I know. In fact, no one has bitten me more times than my dear friend Ian Nordling, who at one time in a summer camp, one of the other kids said, Ian tried to taste me. So that summer we referred to being tasted, and boy, was I tasted a lot. So Ian now can talk about, what this was like, because often reflexive and impulsive motor actions are labeled as behaviors, but they're actually below the level of conscious control, right? These were not things that non-speaking folks did intentionally, and yet they were considered to be intentional behaviors and often given consequences because of it. So Ian's gonna relate his experience and memories of the biting years.
I remember it well, as much as I wish I could forget it. It is unfortunately something that I still battle on occasion. Evie is correct that it was not malice-led or deliberate. Eventually I learned the term impulsive motor, and this is a perfect example. It is something that happens when I become dysregulated, and sometimes as hard as I try, I cannot stop it from happening.
So now we get to purposeful motor. Purposeful motor is that beautiful interaction that includes sensory, motor, supplementary motor cortex. So you experience this whenever you do a novel task. So if I was to pass out a ball of yarn and knitting needles to each of you, assuming that you don't already know how to knit, and were to teach you how to knit, that would become a purposeful activity. And I would give you some words to coach you on that, right? Put the needle in, wrap the yarn, move it off. Put the needle in, wrap the yarn, move it off. And you might even recite this to yourself as you were doing it. That's purposeful motor. It requires planning. It's generally not easy at first, but as we practice it over and over and over again, it becomes overlearned and automatic, and it becomes myelinated, right? So babies are not born able to walk or talk or jump or do a bunch of things. In fact, they're cute, but rather unimpressive in terms of their purposeful skills. So everything that you all have learned how to do was at one point purposeful, and you practiced and practiced and practiced it till it became automatic. So all of you, presumably, that I've seen in here can walk, but if we were to put you on stilts or a slack line or suddenly turned this conference room into an ice rink, walking would shift back into purposeful motor for you. So what we've done in communication is in spelling to communicate, is taking the motor out of the fine motor of the digits and the articulators and put it in the gross motor of the arm, moving the arm to point to letters on a board, developing greater and greater accuracy until a person is so accurate that they're able to communicate open-ended things, and I'm simply there to receive the letters that he's pointing to. So we progress as you would with any motor skill from simple to more complex. So we start with an alphabet divided into thirds on a stencil. We move to 26 letters. That's in English. Of course, there may be more or less depending on your language. And then that can move to a laminated board like Ian and I are using now. Ian can also use a keyboard, but we need a Bluetooth keyboard and a monitor when typing, so it's much easier for us just to use the laminate board here. As communication skills develop, we move from concrete, closed-ended questions to more open and abstract answers. So all of Ian's responses today were responded to with a different communication partner because I didn't want him to feel any pressure for me to answer in a particular way. So I had a list of questions for him that he responded to for this presentation. Here's Ian's thoughts on communication.
It has been the greatest change of my life to have started to spell to communicate. It has changed my life in ways that I could never have imagined. I am able to choose my own clothes, decide what I want to eat, introduce myself to new people I meet, tell my family how I am feeling, tell them I am having a hard time at my groups, tell them I need a change of scenery, and tell them I am having too many sensory experiences and need to leave a location. Even though I can communicate now, I don't take it for granted. I think it is the single most important thing a human can do. It means everything to me.
Because of communication, Ian now has access to a much more inclusive life. And here are some of the things that he now participates in.
To have a community embrace me with all my differences has been a dream come true. I had the opportunity to serve on an advisory council for my town as well as work with local law enforcement and first responders to develop training programs. I go to restaurants where I am greeted by name, and they always accommodate my strange dietary requests. Friday nights are often spent at Jimmy's or Friday Night Live with my family and friends dancing, and everyone accepts and embraces my awkward dance moves.
Speaking of awkward, E, V, T, H, A, T O U T F I T, Evie, that outfit, M A K E S, makes, A S T A T E M E N T! Exclamation point. Evie, that outfit makes a statement. This was from a disco party we had. So what's up next? How do we move, pun intended, forward?
For deep and meaningful change to occur, we need people in every profession related to autism to support the fact that we have motor differences that affect our ability to produce speech, and that a lack of speech is not an indicator of a lack of intelligence.
So here are the things that we've been busy with. We are working with our partners in technology to innovate the communication that our non-speakers are using. So here's a prototype of a smart letterboard, right? This will give new opportunities to look at data, to record movement, and help advance science as well as communication. We're looking at using STEM and seeing its impact on technology. So in a recent visit to Scotland to see my colleague Jonathan Delafield-Butt, who you heard this morning, where we're looking at sensor data, along with Liz Torres, who also looks at sensor data. And so how can we use that to look at the movements of non-speakers when spelling in their movements? Are their movements qualitatively and quantitatively different than other autistic people and other than neurotypical people? We have so many questions, and STEM has the answer. So things like, how does cognitive affect motor, right? We go back to our knitting example. If you're just learning to knit, and then I ask you to start skip counting by 3, now you're focusing on your motor and your cognition. So what's going on for somebody who's doing a motor task and a cognitive task at the same time? We can help quantify that. What's the effect of sensory input on motor performance? Right? What if we filled this room with a funky smell and flicked the lights on and off and had noises going on? Would that affect motor performance? How do we quantify regulation and its effects in situ, and the effects of a communication partner or other regulation partner who is helping to co-regulate? What's the effect of a familiar person versus an unfamiliar person? What's the best way to measure ocular motor? The movement of the eyes is complex and is highly relevant to spelling and scanning a letterboard and for negotiating through various environments. How do we measure that and quantify that in our non-speaking individuals? And what's the impact of health and wellness on motor performance? All of these variables are significant, and I do believe that STEM has the answer. And in this autism renaissance, where we begin to look at things differently, when we employ science, technology, engineering, and math to make a better future. And of course, during all this, it must have autistic people not as participants, but as our guidance and directing and participating in this work as willing participants and not just as subjects, making non-speaking people a part of the conversation, not the subject of the conversation. So thank you so much for your attention, and with that, I'll give Ian the last word. THANKYOU, thank you. KINDLY, thank you kindly. FORLISTEN, Thank you kindly for listening. I-H-O-P-E. I hope. T-H-I-S, this, H-A-S-M-A-D-E, made, Y-O-U-T-H-I-N-K. I hope this has made you think. D-I-F-F-E-R-E-N-T-L-Y, differently. A-B-O-U-T, about. N-O-N-S-P-E-A-K-I-N-G, about non-speaking. P-E-O-P-L-E.
Thank you, Evie. And thank you, Jan, for that wonderful presentation. And that amazing new way of looking at the non-speaking community and opening new doors for research and into communication and creating new means to communicate from bodily language, bodily variations. And we have a large new path ahead, but the good news is that there's an entire field of motor control that can do this. You don't know it, but there are equations that describe these movements. There are ways to do this, automate the whole process. The field of autism doesn't know this. This entire field has plenty of research. And with the rebirth of AI, with ChatGPT, I can just see how much can be done in collaboration with the motor and the multi-sensor inputs that we get from the rich signals that reach the brain. So thank you for this. I'm open to collaboration in all of it. It's wonderful.